All right, guys, what's going on? It's Jack, and welcome back to another video. So, you guys are actually one of the biggest pieces of influence that I have in terms of what I want to talk about in videos, right? Whether something is mentioned on stream that gives me an idea, or whether it's something in the comment section, or maybe even somebody else's videos, or maybe even, other forms of social media. It kind of gives me ideas in terms of what I want to talk about, right? Especially when there's a little going on within a certain game. I've used this exact same strategy when I've covered other games as well. So, but in terms of the time that we are right now, I really can't see a better time to talk about a subject and a question that has been on my mind for actually quite a long time since this game actually released, as well as members of the community basically saying their point of view in terms of which is better. And that is Splitgate 1 better than Splitgate 2 or vice versa, and why? Now, I think all of us, regardless of whatever side of the fence we're on, I think we can all agree that there are certain things that one game does better than the other. But at the end of the day, for whatever reason, whichever side of the fence you're on, in a lot of people's eyes, there's a clear winner in terms of overall score, one being a little bit better than the other. And that's what I want to discuss here, because another reason other than the subject being interesting, right, is because when you look at what's in the game now in terms of the OG playlist in Splitgate 2, a lot of people really like it. A lot of people are saying make it permanent. Even other content creators out there that are still covering the game, like Jay Boendeman, believes that it should be permanent, if I'm not mistaken, if that's what he said in his recent video, which I have watched. But just to be sure, I always, just to make sure I heard him right, I'm pretty sure that's what he said or what he was alluding to. So, like, a lot of people, even in my streams, comment section or whatnot, have mentioned that they would love for the Splitgate 1 playlist to be permanent. And I actually have to agree. And I think it's also a really good way to put two different flavors of a specific game, namely Splitgate, to kind of be its entity in Splitgate 2, right? The OG playlist, there's absolutely nothing wrong with. If you look at Call of Duty, there's like a bare bones mode, even though that's not exactly, well, actually at one point in time, Call of Duty was a little bit more bare bones, but that was like before the times of COD 4, if I remember correctly. So, but anyway, you guys get the point, right? So let's get a little bit more specific about what it is that you like more about Splitgate 1 compared to Splitgate 2, or vice versa. For those of you guys have been very generous in the comment section, which I absolutely love. And as you guys know, the devs watch my videos and they even spread the word around in my videos, which is one of the most humbling things, that a dev has told me on stream as well. So this is definitely something that I think will be a very, very big form of feedback for the developers. It'll be a sample size bigger than just one person, and that person being me, because at the end of the day, I am just a little pebble in the Splitgate community, right? But whatever reach I have in terms of the number of community members that regularly watch my stuff, I think this can only help steer the game in the right direction. So now I know some of you guys are wondering, well, Jack, what is your opinion? What do you think, right? Some of my takes and the views of specific viewers could be a little controversial in terms of what I think, but my opinion still counts, just like all of your guys' opinions count as well. So here is my opinion in terms of whether Splitgate 1 was better than Splitgate 2, the way I look at it, especially when you compare the two. Now, obviously, I've put in a lot more time into Splitgate 2 in a short period of time than I have in Splitgate 1. However, I did play a good amount of Splitgate 1. However, Splitgate 2 actually helped me realize what Splitgate is all about once I really started putting more and more time into it, unlike Splitgate 1 in comparison of hours, right? And with this OG playlist, I've literally been able to combine the notes that I've mentally taken about what I love about both of the games, and I've begun to get a much clearer understanding as to what Splitgate really is. Because with Splitgate 2, before this OG playlist, I had a specific vision about the game, and it was very specific. But now with the OG playlist coming into play, with all the ways that Splitgate 2 is optimized compared to the first game, because it had a much bigger budget and therefore more team members or developers developing the game and all that kind of stuff, taking notes and combining the two has been very, very interesting and very, very eye-opening for someone like me who absolutely enjoys both the OG playlist as well as the formula that Splitgate 2 itself has offered ever since the beginning, ever since the original beta and then the release, and then now the back at beta again, right? So, okay, so here is my take on it, right? I think there are a couple of weapons that actually feel a little bit better in Splitgate 2, in Splitgate 1, right? But we're talking very specific weapons. And at the same time, I think there are very specific weapons that are better in Splitgate 2. I do think that Splitgate 2 overall feels better in terms of smoothness, responsiveness, and just kind of like the way everything is just so smooth and so responsive, and it shows, right? And on top of that, I think the slide was absolutely a great addition. I'm glad that they brought back the jetpacks from the original Splitgate as well. It's more or less the same, and I really like the implementation. However, I think there's something very interesting to be said about the portal placements and the maps of Splitgate 1. Now, Splitgate 1, generally speaking, is slower than Splitgate 2, but Splitgate 1 isn't slow in a way that slows down the action. And what do I mean by that? So Splitgate 1's maps, the portals are placed very methodically, and they're in a specific spot to where they enhance the game. And yes, they can get you from point A to point B very quickly, but they're more limited in terms of the combinations of possibilities, right? Excuse me. So they're very methodical, and they add another layer to the game without that layer taking over and completely, making things like gun skill and movement irrelevant, right? Splitgate 1 manages to nail that balance perfectly, right? And that's what happens when you look at the OG Splitgate 1 maps that have been reintroduced here, as well as where the portals are placed, right? Okay. And on top of that, because you have a starting weapon, which is a precision weapon meant for longer engagements, for more distant engagements, and of course your assault rifle for something a little bit closer, but at the same time you can have both, right? You can still have close quarters engagements with your precision weapon, as well as long distance engagements with your assault rifle as well. However, mixing and matching the two for the very specific uses in any given map in Splitgate 1 is the optimal way to play, right? So basically what I'm trying to say is you can have an engagement in Splitgate 1, right? Because the maps, in some cases, they have a lot more verticality. In some other cases, they have a lot of close quarters combat, as well as distant combat in very specific areas of the map. But some maps cater towards more long distance engagements, and other maps cater more towards CQC combat, right? And of course, some of these maps have different levels of verticality to them, right? So Splitgate 1 has more variety in terms of their maps compared to Splitgate 2, because Splitgate 2 has a little bit more of a one-sided, I don't want to say completely one-sided approach, because there are multiple levels and there is some verticality, but when you compare Splitgate 1 to Splitgate 2, you've got a little bit more variety in terms of the different kinds of engagements you can get per match. So let's say, for instance, in Splitgate 1, you get into a close quarters engagement with somebody, and then because of where you are on the map, as well as the way the map is designed, you whip out your precision weapon, which happens to be your primary or secondary. I mean, they're both basically primaries if you think about it, but you whip out the right tool for the job, and then you're picking off somebody that's at a distance, that's trying to be in an advantageous position that can take somebody else out, right? I mean, granted, yes, you can do that in Splitgate 2 as well, but in terms of how often that happens, as well as the pacing itself in terms of speed, is not quite the same. Splitgate 1 manages to nail the balance of speed and precision shooting and positioning very, very well. I think that's what Splitgate 1 does a little bit better than Splitgate 2. And in some ways, I actually have to say that it's quite a bit better than Splitgate 2, actually, in that aspect, right? And what does Splitgate 2 do that's better than Splitgate 1? As I mentioned previously, you've got the fact that, you've got an overall more smooth game because there's been more hands working on it, more developers and stuff like that, and it clearly shows, right? And like I said, you got the addition of the slide, and the game just feels smoother, right? Okay, now you've also got the fact that there's more weapons, of course, that you can choose from. You can mix and match. You've got your loadouts and stuff like that. The portals have so many more options that a portal master can literally override a person that's got superior gun skill to them. There are players out there that like that, but at the same time, there are players out there that think that that shouldn't be a thing, or at least not to that extent, simply because of the fact that it knocks the whole game off balance, which I actually agree with. And lately, I've especially been, if you've been watching my streams ever since I talked to Zax Max, I've been using portals a lot more, right? I'm not saying that I'm of that caliber by any means. No, no, no. I still have miles to go before I even get to that point, even if I get there. But I'm definitely using it a lot more. And when it comes to Splitgate 1 maps, when I use the portals in those maps, I find myself being even more effective without being like cracked out of my mind because of how it works. You see what I'm saying? So we're in a very interesting spot here with Splitgate 2 compared to Splitgate 1, because again, as I mentioned, one side of the fence does certain things a little bit better. And I think, and as I mentioned in my previous video, I honestly think that if they actually properly combine the best of both worlds, I think we're in for even more fun than we're already having. And don't get me wrong, I'm a person who absolutely loves the tempo and the speed of Splitgate 2, because that's the kind of arena shooter that I personally enjoy more than anything. However, I definitely appreciate the kind of variety that Splitgate 1 offers, because of the fact that it still keeps the action at a reasonable pace while simultaneously giving a nod to players that are a little bit more passive, a little bit more slower, as well as people that are faster. It's a really good medium space, right? And at the same time, you know, when you look at Splitgate 2 in terms of what it offers, is you've got situations to where you might have a little bit more of a gunfight thing going, and the pacing is that much faster, because that I enjoy that, right? Because if you think about it, like Splitgate 2 is kind of a nod in a sense to like what Quake is, and then Splitgate 1 is a little bit more original than Splitgate 2. Let's just be real. Splitgate 1 is just a little bit more original than Splitgate 2, which again, I'm not taking away from Splitgate 2 because I absolutely love it. I absolutely adore it. Okay, but if we can mix and match, I think would be in a really, really good spot. Some players and people in my comment section have mentioned that if they don't mind being able to pick your weapons and loadouts, but having the kind of maps and portal placement that Splitgate 1 has. Some people don't even mind the factions, you know, but even if factions didn't exist, again, Splitgate 1 is still a banger in and of itself. It's still that game that has an identity of its own and its own flavor. Splitgate 2, on the other hand, even though that game does still have an identity of its own, because of all those different things that the game has implemented in it, there's a lot of things that people can scratch their heads at and be like, okay, what is this game trying to be? Whereas in Splitgate 1, it's a lot more evident that, okay, this is what Splitgate is. And in Splitgate 2, if you introduce somebody to it, it's like, okay, or should I say a person who's played first-person shooters before, they're like, okay, what's this game trying to be exactly? You know what I mean? Other than the fact that, you know, you can go all crazy ham with the portals, right? Splitgate 1 was more unique because of its map design and the way the gunplay works in terms of its limitations, and the fact that power weapons can actually be even more viable in Splitgate 1 because of the fact that of just the way everything just works. And the fact that Splitgate 1, in its own unique way, because of how the portals work, you actually have to move in a lot of cases in order to get that, you know, superior the superior spot on the map from the portals, right? Splitgate 2, on the other hand, you don't have to move as much, or if at all, right? You can be next to a portal wall and you can portal from one to the other and be all over the place within, you know, just a few seconds. In Splitgate 1, it's a lot. It takes more work in order to do that. You still, I feel from my experiences in playing in nothing but this OG playlist over the last couple sessions, as well as the last couple streams, I feel like Splitgate 1 makes you work for that portal superiority, whereas Splitgate 2, it just kind of gives it to the player, right? And especially for those players that have already mastered the portal system, it's like, okay, you know, all of a sudden, you know, gun skill and movement doesn't play as much of a role anymore, which is part of Splitgate 2's problem as far as the portal system is concerned, right? And again, this is coming from a person who actually enjoys the shit out of Splitgate 2 because of the fact that it's got that higher amount of pacing. It's basically tuned up to 11. If Splitgate 1 is like, let's say 8, right? Splitgate 2 is 11, okay? It's dialed up to 11. And I think a lot of players, and I could be wrong, you guys can add to this if you want, but I think that's part of what maybe made Splitgate 2 players just kind of stop, because, well, as far as casuals are concerned, is because maybe it was just the combination of things was just too much, and slowing down actually kind of worked against them. Again, I personally like this, but at the same time, again, we're looking at it from a casual perspective. I get it. I understand it, especially if it was a game that I was first getting into and there was too much going on. It would have been too overwhelming. You know what I'm saying? But with Splitgate 1, you can actually slow things down and you can have an understanding of what's going on. And it's a lot more accessible because of the tempo being a little bit slower. But again, it still remains to be high action, right? Because because movement matters, right? And with the way that Splitgate 2 has its movement, it favors Splitgate 1 very well. I think it actually enhances Splitgate 1, to be honest. So this is one of the many reasons why I think a combination of the two, granted the right combination of the two, would absolutely make the difference and make Splitgate that much better. Like, because Splitgate 2 can't just be a better looking version of Splitgate 1 and a smoother, feeling version of Splitgate 1. It needs to be more than that. And that's where I think the right combination of what Splitgate 2 does very, very well as what Splitgate 1 did very, very well, and omitting what both of those games didn't do very well, and present that to the audience, as well as all the bells and whistles that a lot of people expect from the first-person shooters. You have a winning formula here. And on top of that, you have an identity that makes you stand out from all these other first-person shooters. And most of that comes from the map design, as well as the portal placement itself, that allows for that type of gameplay to where you can have your passive and aggressive existing in one space, and you can have at it, and you can be rewarded for both, right? And that's what I think Splitgate 1 does better than Splitgate 2. Now, in terms of, again, whether I think one is better than the other, even for someone like me, who adores the living shit out of Splitgate 2, it's very hard for me to choose one over the other, because I have come to appreciate the OG playlist and the map design for Splitgate 1 more than I ever did before. And I think part of the reason is because you've got the Splitgate 2 movement, which I am a very big fan of, as well as the two weapons that you get in your loadouts. Now, would I like for there to be a little bit more variety in terms of letting people choose one precision weapon that they like from the bunch, as well as one of the automatics that they like from the bunch? Yes. As a matter of fact, I think that would even enhance it even more. You'd have a lot more variety, and then let everybody have the same exact starting weapons in ranked. I think that's the way it should be. Again, not that it doesn't work in pubs, but I'm just saying, like, with pubs, there's got to be more variety, a little bit more wiggle room, because that's one of the differences between pubs and ranked. And that's one of the things that I think would work very, very well in Splitgate 2, especially with the relaunch if they implement this correctly. So with that being said, with that being said, I want to know in the comment section what you think, as well as all the details. And if I had to choose one over the other right now, it would be very tough. I can't even answer that question right now, because I am just the way I fell in love with Splitgate 2 when it launched, and then continue to play it, to this very day, and I still love it. I am getting that similar feeling for the Splitgate 1 OG playlist now, in a way that I didn't have with the original Splitgate when it was already out. And I think a lot of that has to do with the way Splitgate 2's movements work, as well as the slide adding in its tempo, but at the same time with the tempo that the Splitgate 1 maps offer and the portal placements. And that's my conclusion. I literally can't pick right now. I mean, I'm thinking about it. I've thought about it before recording this, and I can't pick, because there are so many things I like about what the OG playlist is offering, and there's so many things I like about Splitgate 2. So with that being said, guys, I want to know all the details in the comment section down below. Give all the feedback to the devs. And as always, I'd like to thank everybody for taking the time to watch and or listen. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.